I like, this is one of my favorite pictures right here. I don't want to flip this back over without ruining. I'm sure, Laura, you're looking at me like, I spent a lot of time setting that up.
Yeah, we took it all apart and Laura gets to put it back together.
Yeah.
Pooh. I'm not good at technical stuff like loops in a binder.
Yeah.
I never have been good at that, you know. They had a trapper keeper thing when I was in high school, and I could totally ruin that. Teacher's like, where's your notes? I was like, I got drawings in there. I don't know. Never took notes in school. I drew pictures. This is one of my favorite images.
Yeah, I was reading a book on how the Incas moved those big stones upside the mountain. I think I figured it out. And
Yeah.
That's pre-Photoshop.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Levitating is pretty cool. What frequency were you using?
It's secret.
How many megahertz?
You got to have a magic dog. It has to be a blue healer.
Gotta be. I got a magic dog, no doubt.
Yeah,
Hopefully she
you got
won't
the
let us
dog.
know about it any minute now. Yeah. So, you know, we started off talking about something. I always like to touch base on, have you ever seen something in the sky that you couldn't explain? Now, I don't like to say alien spacecraft, so we'll say unidentified flying object. That's exactly what it is. And we touched on it, but I'll let you tell your experience, because I saw the same shape twice.
Yeah. Well, I was on a trip out to Montana where I found the Montana Mafia.
Yeah, no doubt.
And we were out there in that desert. And I'm looking out the window of the truck. I think I was riding with Timmy Snyder. If it wasn't, it was Shane Taylor, but it was either Timmy or Shane Taylor, because Timmy was my driver. He was taking me out. Ain't nothing close out there. 200 miles is a trip to town.
Yeah.
Shane's Ranch is 45 miles from a paved road.
Yeah.
And then you go to town from there. Anyway, so if you go to town, it's an all-day trip. Anyway, we're out there, and I'm looking, and I'm seeing something that just didn't compute. This thing was the size of this building, this parking lot. It's big. It's like an eighth of an acre, maybe, or a quarter of an acre.
Yeah.
And it's like 10 or 20 feet thick. It's jet black, triangular shape. It's got a couple little lights on it. And it was moving so slow, it didn't make any sense. Because I know about airplanes.
No noise.
I used to build no noise. Mm-hmm. And it's ultra quiet, and it's moving like this. And I'm looking out the window, I'm trying to remember who I was with. And I'm going, do you see that? And they said, yeah. I said, okay. And that was the end of the conversation, because neither one of us wanted to admit that we're looking at something we didn't understand.
Yeah.
So we didn't talk about it anymore.
Wow.
No way. And then one other time, when I was a very young man, I worked at a company called LTV Aerospace right out of high school. And me and a guy that did heat treating, aluminum heat treating, walked out in between the buildings, so we're going to take a break. And so we're looking up to a little narrow area in the building, and I see three lights that look like one of those Norelco shaving heads. I'm looking at that, and I look at the guy's name was Billy DeWitt. I think that's
really.
Yeah, I think that was his name. And no, I'm almost pretty sure that's him. And I knew his last name was DeWitt, but I can't remember his first name. Anyway, we're looking up through there, and that thing was there for a second, and it went, and it was gone. Yeah. Because you couldn't see. I mean, you're looking through a wedge. And I said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "I didn't. If you didn't." And that was the end of the conversation. We went in. But that's my UFO story.
Yeah. So I always like looking at the sky. Like last night, I was sitting out there on the deck looking at the sky, and I heard something in the bushes. And I was listening to a story about the Skinwalker Ranch, and it freaked me out. So I went inside, but it was Daisy. I opened the door and Daisy came in. But my first time, me and Shelly were walking out. She lived on this road called Schoolhouse Road, and this was back in the 90s, I don't know, 93 probably. And we used to walk all the time. And look up, we'd look at it because there's so many stars in the sky. There was a big triangular delta-shaped section where there was no stars. I'm like, did you see that? It looked like the Eiffel Tower was up there with a big black space in between it with like just one little light on each corner. You know? It was just super slow, no sound. And I thought that was impressive. We watched it for a while and kind of floated off. It wasn't going fast, didn't make any noise. And then what's funny is it's notable, and I remembered it, but I didn't think about it again. Mm-hmm. And a few years later, me and her brother were going between her mom and dad's house, which was in Dorchester, and my mom and dad's house, which is in Harleyville, it was probably about 8 mile section. And we were, there's a big field. The guy had a big cow pasture, and we were looking out across the Mims cow pasture, and I saw a really big one, and it was far enough off, and there were 3 jets following it, and it was just cruising across the skyline, and the jets were following it. And then it went and it made a turn and it came back and they were following like escorts. And now when I see stuff like that, I'm never going to say outer space aliens.
No,
I think that's
I think it's
silly,
I think it's absolutely
yeah,
technology.
I think there's so much more interesting stuff that we have no clue about. But if we had a mutual student, he was talking about the pyramids one day, and I said, "Yeah, they're made out of concrete." He about came out of his skin, you know. He was freaking out. He goes, "No, they had to be." I said, "Limestone tests like limestone. Concrete that's 100 years old tests like limestone." And anyway, we didn't come to talk about aliens, even though
no.
we didn't talk about them in the first place. We did talk about UFOs, which was more fun anyhow.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Wizard of Damascus. I'm accurate by saying that.
Yeah.
You're like the Gandalf of steel making.
I've been at it a while.
Yeah.
You know, we all live on the backs of giants, and the Damascus material itself never stopped being produced, except there was some lags in the woods. The crystalline Damascus, there's 2 different kinds. One is cast, and then the pattern is manipulated from the dendritic casting into what they call wootz steel or bulat, or quote true Damascus.
Yeah.
By a specific forging process, a heat treating process. The other stuff is layered material, and that's been produced since the beginning of ironwork.
Yeah, I get in a lot of trouble if I say Damascus because the have not dones.
Yeah.
You know, they never did it. They just idealize, and they tell me, like, "That's not really Damascus." I'm like, whatever. I know the guys who invented it. So
It's so funny. When the quote rediscovery came in the United States, it was hilarious. Because I worked with Al Pendray, who's since passed, and he's a great guy. He's a good friend. Everybody thought I spent years with Alfred working in his shop to get my skill sets, and the fact is I spent a half a day over there, and that's a funny story.
Yeah.
I was trying to forge weld, and I was already forging blades. I started forging blades in '72. And that's another.
That was 47 years ago.
That was I started forging, but I made some knife-shaped objects in the '60s.
Yeah.
And everybody at the aircraft plant made knives out of stainless. We didn't know anything about heat treating or any of that kind of stuff. So we looked at it and went, okay, I'll try that. You know, but they weren't real knives. They were knife-shaped objects. Boy, that's a nice train.
I like the way it shakes the building.
Yeah, it shakes the building,
honest.
comes by. And he's driving really slow. Anyway, so I made these knife-shaped objects. So that was the nucleus of it. And then I actually forged steel in junior high with an old shop teacher of mine named Joe Hodge. He was a wonderful guy. And he took a lot of time. You know, those guys are protected like ex-Secret Service and ex-presidents. You can't get at them.
Yeah,
so
shop should still be taught in school.
I had to go through a lot of machinations to get to that guy. And I finally got his address. And I just wrote the chapter on mosaic Damascus in David Jerome's book, Modern Mosaic or Custom Folding Knives, is the name of the book. I wrote that chapter in there. And I wanted this guy that planted that seed in me, just like you do with your forge school, is getting me started with forging. And even though that was a one-time class making a cold chisel, it planted a seed that grew into what I do now.
Right.
And so I wanted him to have one of these books, and I sent it to him. It was pretty neat.
That's cool.
Reconnecting. He remembered me.
Yeah.
Probably not for my great work, but.
Yeah. My first experience forging, we would take, there were little small drill bits, and you know, any knife that would cut, it was in the 80s, and I would hammer them, and we'd harden them in motor oil or something, and I'd make little miniatures and stuff. But I'd been grinding some knives, and before that, when I was a little kid, I'd hammer on copper. My cousins had an anvil at their house, and we'd bang on copper until it would just crumble into dust. I'd try to make knives out of stone or whatever I could. But I want to get to you. The first 2 master bladesmiths that I met that treated me like a friend was you and Don Fogg. And I met you guys at Batson's Hammer Inn.
Well, you were on fire,
Yeah.
and still are.
Yeah,
You
trying
know,
to be.
that's rare.
Yeah.
It's rare in this industry where you devote your life to something.
Yeah, I like you got parts of your scrapbook with history. There's a lot of history here. You know, like I was showing this was a cool image right here. Took a lot of meditation and reading to be able to float like that back before the days of Photoshop. But it is from the Magic Dog.
Yeah, it's a magic dog.
Yeah.
And I was reading a book on how the Incas moved those stones up the mountain. I pretty well got it figured out.
Cool. I like that. I'm gonna let that sit right there. So for me, I remember one of the first, this is it. So Mr. Michael Lewis was my English teacher in school and still a friend. And we had to do a periodical review. So I'm always gonna be writing on knives. I would write on Eric Callahan and Don Fogg and Steve Schwarzer, and I wrote an article on this knife.
On that shooting scene.
And you did in the shooting scene. And this is notable and very important to knife history to me and to anybody who's making mosaic. Or popularity right now is, of course, canister Damascus. And unfortunately, most of what we get to see is people are just putting junk in it, like fish hooks and pieces of crap and chain. I hate that. That's trash. But this is solid gold right here. This is art. And this has not been replicated since you did it this time.
No, it's not.
So I want you to talk about it for a minute.
Okay, I always believe in giving credit where credit's due, and one of the few people, there was like a half a dozen people doing high-level pattern welding in the U.S., and I always put the caveat that I knew about.
Yeah.
Because there's always some guy hiding up in a hole that you don't know about that's doing work.
Like in Java.
Exactly, like in Java. But this shooting scene is, I was doing pretty high-level mosaic work at the time, and I'd been doing mosaic stuff since '80. And matter of fact, that's the first mosaic knife.
This one right here.
Yeah, this one right here. And that was sold to the Lorenzi family in Italy.
Yeah.
And I took it to a show, and it was 81 or 82 I sold that knife, but it was made around 80, 81. Anyway, I was doing that grid system, but I always put cutting edges in them. Mm-hmm. And so I began to develop the patterns, and I was doing following the Murano glass techniques, and I was trying to replicate all the glass patterns in that book. Aldo Lorenzi, who bought that first knife from me, his wife, Ada, got the Murano glass book. It was only published in Italian. Now it's now published in English. And I got those glass patterns, and she annotated the entire book in the margins with a pencil on the pertinent things to technique. And I applied those to knives, and that's what forced me to develop, or it aided me in developing my pattern. I was doing that, and then Daryl Meyer, who was one of the one or two guys that I could call and talk to about pattern welding. Everybody was real secretive about what they were doing. He was the only guy who was happy to talk to me when I discovered something. And he's always been my teacher, will always be my teacher.
Yeah.
He's genius.
Yeah.
He's still alive, even though he's a grape farmer now. He's like the best pattern welder that ever lived.
Yeah.
But anyway, he says, why don't you make something real? And so I did. And I mean, that thing took months to put together because you had to feel what's going on. The problem is that gun barrel straight, and of course he probably won't be able to see it over there but that picture in there, I only made 4 of these. Yeah. That was all of them that were ever made. And it was such a stressful situation to do that, but to set that up, there's loops in the arm where he's holding the gun, there's a loop in there. Yeah. He's got heels on his boots and a bill on his cap, but the trick is the gun barrel. That guy started off 1.5 inches tall, and now he's this tall, and he's still pristine.
No distortion.
No distortion, and the gun barrel's straight. That's why it hadn't been replicated. Right. Straight line patterns are very difficult. This is a straight line pattern here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And that's very difficult to do because of the distortion, and you can't see what's going on in that bar. You have to feel what's going on in that bar while you're working it. Right. And then with this thing, it was so critical that I was having to stop every little bit and cut a piece off the end and look at it to make sure that thing was going where it wanted to go.
So I wanted to tell everybody real quick, if you want to see the images of these, we're going to put a link in the description. So your website, so there's a link to Steve's website when you see this podcast, and you can go click that link and follow it and look at better images of any of these photographs that are on there.
You can touch anything on that website and blow it up and look at it in detail.
So you can see.
And of course I teach the method, but I've got like one-on-one classes to teach these techniques, but I'm very selective who gets there.
Yeah, that's right. And that's another thing. I've had a lot of people who have come to take my class, and then I feel like I said, okay, if you're okay, then I'll let you talk to Steve, because I kind of, a lot of times they'll come and take a class with me. It's like, I want to take Damascus somewhere. I said, take it with Steve, but you know, you might not be cool enough to take it. So,
Well,
we've had some good guys down
yeah,
there.
we've had some good ones, and what's amazing is what's done. I'd give a little plug to Uncle Nick Rossi. I went up to teach a class with Nick, a powder metal class with Nick up at the New England School.
Yeah.
And brilliant facility, and Nick Rossi's just he's a prince of a guy. But I had, how many students was it, Laura, 4 or 6?
6.
There were 6 students in the class. 2 of them had never forge welded before.
Yeah.
And they did some of the most amazing patterning, but it had to do with that powder technique that I developed.
Yeah.
And that's what we did, was powder metal. But that was pre-this. This was all solids.
Yeah.
So these all had to be cut with a wire EDM and fit like a puzzle. But that's not the trick. The puzzle's easy.
Right.
Anybody can make the puzzle. It's like cutting out blocks of wood, sticking it together, glue it, and it's done, because you're not shrinking it.
Right.
The control and forging on this was critical. It's like you see these little tiny birds in there. Like I said, they'll have to go on it.
They look like quail to me.
They are quail, and they got flight feathers on them.
That's
on
right.
the ends of the wings.
Yeah.
And you can see all those flight feathers with a loop in the real knives.
Yeah.
But that block was this big, and that bird was 3/4 of an inch from wingtip to wingtip.
Yeah.
And that 2-inch block went to a 1/4 inch block.
I remember the original image I saw this. It might have been Eric taking the picture, but there's a blown up picture.
It may be in
of
here.
And I think it was Eric. Eric's one of the only guys who could
He was
capture
the only
those
one that could
crispy, clean images.
Yeah, there
like
it is,
that.
right there.
Yeah. That's
Hell, you destroyed my book, and it's right on top. So you got lucky.
Be careful, don't knock your knives off. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, you can, if you go to Steve's website, click the link in the description, but you can see that's a quail.
Yeah.
And if you've never been quail hunting, if you get wild quail, they'll take off like, you'll jump out of your skin. If you get farm quail, they'll kind of go and then they'll hop.
Yeah. Wild quails,
Wild quail are gone.
that put us out of the hog hunting business. Quail did. Because we had the guys coming, we hog hunting in the swamp, just going on. My mind wanders all over the place. But when you said that, we had a guy from upstate New York with us, and that's where they're good people.
Yeah.
They're country people. People always think about New York as a city. This ain't the city. This is upstate, and he's a country guy, farmer. But he wanted to pack a pistol because he can't carry one up there. So we're out on a farm north of Palatka, and these dog fennels is a big high weed.
Yeah.
At night,
Keep
hog
bugs
hunting.
away.
Anyway, so we're hog hunting, and he stepped in a couple of those quail, and they were wild quail, and they flew up all over. All we could hear was him reaching for that pistol. So that ended that up. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, you say something like dog fennel, and that sends me down another road, because I used to, when I would hunt all the time, I wouldn't use bug spray. I'd get the dog fennel, and I'd rub it up real tight, and I'd rub myself with that, and I'd never get bugs on me.
I'm gonna adapt that to my. But anyway, that's a reduction. You see how big that is, and that's half size of what it started, and that's half size of what it started.
Yeah.
And that's the finished block.
Where's that knife now?
There's 4 of them, and they're in private collections.
Yeah, that's cool.
That the big one, there was 3 like this, and then one big one, and I made one. Let's see, no, 2 like this, one big one. Then I made another one. I just turned it loose, and it's in the States.
Cool.
It's here. I'm reluctant to give collectors names and stuff because they're private and they're stuff. They have valuable collections, and I don't want to put them at risk. But these birds, in order to get those flying, that's all the same bird.
Yeah.
That's not 6 different birds, but
It's
it
the
looks
same
like 6
image.
different birds.
Yeah.
And so, in this welding process is a matter of finding a solution to a problem.
Right.
I needed the birds, so what I did is I reduced those to 1/4 inch square rod. Forged that down without destroying that bird. It came from 2.5 inches down to 1/4 inch square, that long, and the bird's pristine. That forging technique had to be exact. And then what I did in order to orient them in that block is I took little short sections of that and I put it in a lathe. I ground the ends, etched them, put them in an optical comparator and blew it up that big and got the exact center of that, punched it, and I put it in a lathe and I turned them around. And then I put a little slight curve bend in them. Then I took this block and I shoved those in the hole, orienting those birds in the way I wanted them flying. And one of them is flared because he's been shot.
Yeah.
So I just rotated it up like that. And if you see this image in any of these, if you blow that up big enough, you'll see a little round halo around each one of those birds. That's where I made those little round rods.
Yeah.
And then I had to scale those to the man and the dog, and I had to scale the dog to the man
Yeah.
to fit that, and then I had to put the birds to that.
Put 'em
But
all together.
anyway,
That's cool.
When Daryl Meyer saw it, he said, sometimes a student passes the master is probably the greatest compliment I've ever been paid
Yeah.
by a guy that earned his stripes.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of him, I think Daryl, it was like 1968, he wrote a dissertation on Damascus and making Damascus, and I remember he was in a university
Yeah, Carbondale.
paper. Yeah, it was in
Yeah,
the
brilliant
60s.
Yeah, he was really on the cutting edge of it doing research,
Yeah.
and he didn't fit the ordinary mold. He was in between academia and craft.
Yeah.
And of course, we had the bladesmith guys, and they were all different. But what was funny about that material is when Pendray got interested, it was in the 70s, and they were horseshoers, and they made their own tools.
Yeah.
They made their own tongs and stuff. And this layering process, they did it by gathering up stuff. I mean, if they had a piece of buggy spring, or they knew what to do to make a hammer, and they put a hard piece of steel on the face of it. If you etched any of those tools, they would show pattern.
Yeah.
Because they're made up out of all this stuff. And there was 40 guys making pattern weld in the 60s, 50s, and 60s around Ocala, Florida, that were horseshoers.
Yeah.
They didn't know they were making pattern weld. That's just
doing
a
it.
tradition that came from 6,000 years ago.
I learned how to, I'm going to get stupid. I learned how to forge weld from a farrier named Billy Ridgel. He showed me how to forge weld.
Billy Riggin?
Yeah, Billy Ridgel, yeah. He's still around. He's still kicking, good friend. He's still shoeing horses, and I think he's 75 or 76.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But he ain't got nothing else to do, you know. He's
Well, I ain't fooling with nothing. Weighs 1,400 pounds, got a brain big as a pea.
keeps him young. Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I always like the when you're one of the makers also that you never did work in the in a confined style or in a confined box. You're always doing your own thing, sculpturally, carving, making what you wanted to make, making what kind of steel you wanted to make, and setting up standards for. Right now, a lot of bladesmiths have no idea where any of their history is coming from. They're doing it, or they're watching it on TV, and then YouTube is a big contributor, and that's a good thing. I like to see more people getting into forging and enjoying it as an art, and striving to do great. Like I compared it the other day to musicians playing music. I was talking to Ryan, I was like, man, we all get a guitar when we're a kid and we're framming on it, and we're going to be a rock star.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of people framming on metal too, and I understand everybody thinks that what they got is good enough. Not always good enough, but do it because you love it. Do it because it's your art.
Right.
Don't do it because you think you got to sell it or whatever. I mean, we're in a place where I kind of didn't have any choice, and I was determined that I'm making knives. I'm not going back to do tires. I'm going to make knives. I'm not going to wrench on cars, which I don't even think I was too good at it. But so it's like one of those things. It's a progression. It's like this is what God made me to do. Like, so if Neil Peart, he's passed on, but God made him to be a drummer.
Right.
He's one of the greatest ever.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, I feel like that was what we were designed to be. That was who we were designed to be and what we were made to do. And we do it, and we do it well.
And that's what's so important about what you're doing and what I'm doing at this stage of the game is teaching.
Yeah.
I love doing this stuff. I get up every day just as excited as I was when I started to put this stuff together. That's what's living in there.
Yeah, if you touch this, you're gonna pee the bed.
Yeah.
That's all there is to
it. That is a compilation of all of my art. And everybody said, well, that's weird. The little eyeballs follow you around. I figured that out. I was doing these goblins goblin folders,
Yeah, those are
and that
great.
stuff. That Schmidt started that, but I moved on into this other carved stuff.
Yeah, I like the
This
goblin
guy
folders.
this was an interesting guy.
Yeah.
But they all are a reflection of my mood of the day. Everybody says, well, where'd that come from? And so, well, you don't want to live in here. I do.
Yeah.
But it's fun stuff.
Yeah, it's fun stuff.
And then developing the techniques to make it work.
Where'd you get that hammer from? Can you
I
talk
bought
about
that hammer came from Bethlehem Steel.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking for an air hammer, and I bought that thing in 1982. And I built my shop around it in Pomona Park. I now live, my shop's in Crescent City, Florida.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's by appointment only.
Right.
You can't just wander up
Yeah,
there.
I don't let people come on. Hey,
Nah.
can I come and just watch you work? Hey,
No.
$500 a day, you can watch me work.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you're lucky.
But you can't talk, and you got to sit in the corner and shut.
Yeah. But it's, well, people don't realize how long it took you to get to where you are with
Yeah.
your time. I mean, you know, you taught me a lesson, and it was later in life, and it was one of the best things I added to, because how do you value your work? And then you go, you're not buying this,
Yeah.
you're buying a block of my time I'm not going to get back. And
Never
that's
getting in
serious
there.
stuff.
I think about it like this. My wife would say our most valuable commodity really is time.
Right.
You can invest in it, and you can get a return out of it, but you can't make any more of it. There's only a limited amount of it.
That's it. You don't get it
And
back.
I don't take it for granted, and I do share it generously, but I make sure I'm investing it in the right places at the right times now, especially now. And it's one of those things. It's like I'm fascinated with watches and stuff because it is calculated. It's like this is the minute you have, but you never get that minute back.
No.
So when people go, how much is that? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. You can always make more money. You can never make that again. This can never be made again this way.
No.
Every piece is going to be the way it
Well,
is.
they're
and that's
unique.
it.
This is unique in the world.
Yeah.
That back is unique. That's a base off a elk,
Yeah.
and I just recarved it, and that's the image that's in it. And
Yeah, I
then
like that so much.
I love the
I would like to carry this around with me to go, like if I was at dinner, I would just pull this off and I'd be eating horse steel verres with that thing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's cool.
that'll work.
I like stuff like this because it inspires me to do crazy things, you know. And
You
that's
got to
what's
do
cool.
it because you love it.
And also, like I can get away with wearing anything I want to, you
Yeah.
know.
That's
I like
handy.
that. Anybody can if they just own it. You can wear anything you want. You got to own it.
That's it.
Like I got an idea for the next suit I want. I want a sky blue suit with clouds on it, like Prince was wearing in the Raspberry Beret video. And if you haven't seen it, that's the suit I'm going to get and wear to Blade Show 2021. And anyway,
That'd be great. I love what they did. I mean, I hate they canceled the show this year, but it was out. I mean, that crew, never a better bunch to work with.
yeah, we had Alicia in here, and we talked about it, and our hopes were high. But even then, when we were doing our podcast with Alicia, we were talking privately that, it's a possibility that they may have to call it. And I think it was a good call. She waited right up
Smart.
until,
It was smart.
and it was a good call. And anybody who complains and yipes about it, like, well, don't come next year. We'll have more fun without you.
Yeah, and the buyer's market would be better.
Oh yeah, it'll be great.
I float around. I'm always doing stuff, discovering stuff, trying to figure out better ways to do stuff, and that's one of them.
One
That
of
was
the,
a powder.
yeah, this is what year is this one from? It's got
That was-
Schwarzer in it.
it
This is
was-
on the.
It
This
was.
will be on your website too.
Oh,
You can see
exactly. That's my actual signature done in steel, and there's a story behind that thing. Is signatures have been done probably since early 1700s by
Yeah.
stacking rods, and then there's some writing that was done, like the Ulfberg legs, like Rick Furrier did, the
Yeah.
Secrets of the Viking Sword guy. He was a student of mine that's now a teacher of
Yeah.
mine. That's the way I look at him, because he's my material science guy and he's a research genius.
Yeah.
So if I need something, I need to find out something specifically historically or modern. He's one of my go-to guys, and he's the main one because he will always tell me the truth. He's not worried about hurting my feelings. So
Right.
He'll tell me the truth about stuff, and it's a big deal, and he's real sharp. But anyway, this stuff came about. I was up at Batson, I'm having a hard time because it's far back on timelines, but I talked to Gary Runyon, and he refreshed me, because the first time I saw powder was at Teledyne, and they make powder metal products like carbide and that sort of thing.
Teledyne sounds like a name out of the Terminator.
Yeah.
Skynet. Teledyne. I was like,
they are Terminator.
Yeah, they make Terminator.
Well, they were actually making weaponry at the time,
Yeah.
and this was prior to Gulf War.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're in there, and they're making armor penetrators and cluster bomb parts and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, I was the first trip up there. I met him at Batson's, and he's over there trying to wick nickel powder and borax into a piece of cable.
Yeah.
And I've already been doing canisters for 2 or 3 years, and Daryl and that bunch have been doing canisters. I have no idea where that started, but what it was a low-tech form of a HIP, which is a hot isothermal press, where they put everything in a bag, pull a vacuum on it, and they put it in this $500,000, $1 million furnace, and they heat it up and put pressure, and it diffusion bonds everything perfectly. Well, neither one of us could afford one.
Right.
So we made our own version of this, and we basically pulled a vacuum on a can and beat the thing, which is going to segue into something else. My mind's already tracked over. Anyway, so I figure out this contraption with this can. This is a pre-powder, okay? So I got this piece of a stainless steel tube on the can. I'm pulling a vacuum on it. And I thought, man, I got all the oxygen out. That's the whole key to forge one. You get the oxygen out, it welts. It doesn't matter how you do it. If you get the oxygen off, it wants to hold hands, because it has an affinity for itself. So I'm heating this up, and the minute I started beating on it with that hammer, that thing would split and it'd suck air in, because it had a vacuum on it, and it defeated the purpose of it. So I thought, well, I had a friend at a phone company, and he threw me off some nitrogen bottles, so I used nitrogen. You know, you don't get nitrogen embrittlement in the short time that we're using, so I bled that in there, put a vacuum. And I had this, it was a rig that they put Freon in cars with. And I had it all hooked up to this thing with a manifold, long hose. And I'm welding stuff at temperatures. If I told you, you'd call me a liar.
Yeah.
It's that cold, because there's no air. It wants to hold hands. So I'm welding this stuff up, and I'm so full of myself. I am just like, I'm king of the hill. I've arrived, and I can weld buffalo manure to rocks kind of thing. and I couldn't wait to tell Daryl Meyer about it, because he's like my guru, my hero. I went running up to Daryl, and I said, you won't believe what I've discovered. And I've got this thing, because he was the only one that was really interested in me when I got excited.
Right.
So I'm like hyper now, because I'm thinking about it going back. My mind's there. And I said, I did that, and it's welding. He said, yeah. He said, I just put a couple of drops of diesel in there. I don't have to have all that stuff.
Yeah.
I went, dude. Well, I popped my balloon. I wilted. But he was good at that. And he was the one that challenged me to do that shooting scene.
Yeah.
And I did it. I mean, he's a hero to me.
Yeah.
He always will be.
Last time I saw him at Blade Show a few years ago, he had a piece of steel he'd made, and it looked like a holograph.
Yeah.
And it was pretty simple. It was just lines going this way and lines going this way, but they were perfectly
Square.
There was no distortion in it. And he had it polished. And I was like, oh, that's cool. When'd you make that? He goes, oh, I don't know, like 1978 or something.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
The first radial Damascus that was done, he did. I've got the pieces.
Yeah.
I've got them in my shop. And I've got the Huey Bartog's MC squared that he did. I've got that, and I've got one of Daryl's American flags he did for
Ronald Reagan.
Ronnie
Reagan.
Yeah. And that was, I did one for Senior Bush.
Yeah, that's cool.
Fillet knife. Damascus. It was cool.
Yeah, I like the, I like when you start telling stories. You told me a story about, so you know who used to live here? A buddy of yours, Larry Harley.
Yeah.
And so I like the story you told me about when he showed up in your yard one day.
Oh yeah, Larry Harley. This guy, if anybody didn't know him, he's massive.
Yeah.
His arms as big around me.
Yeah.
And get out. He drove up in a 240Z. And when he got out, the car stood up 2 inches. It was amazing.
How did he get his big ass in there?
No, it's unbelievable. He was an incredibly intelligent guy.
Yeah.
He put on this big fake country act, but he was sharp cookie.
Yeah.
Anyway, he came down one time, and that opened up a whole nother nest of worms. But he gave me this big steel ball, and it weighed 260 something pounds. And so he gets out, and then I got an anvil out of a huge drop hammer. I don't know what that thing weighs. I use it for a counterweight on my tractor when I don't have my wife Laura on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's massive, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he throws this ball out there, and it laid in my yard until it sunk down from the rain and all, till it's halfway over the hemisphere. And he shows back up, and he says, "You're going to do anything with that?" And I said, "Yeah, I need it in the shop." He went over and shoved his fingers in the ground and picked it up and said, "Where do you want it?" I said, "Over there." Anyway,
Put it in
and
there.
it went over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was an amazing guy.
Yeah.
And there's a segue to that ball story, and I'll throw it in real quick. It's funny. This thing is laid in my shop for 25 years, almost 30 years. I forgot where it came from. So I'm making this big cooker, and I need a plug for the stovepipe. So I'm going to weld an eye on this thing. And so I'm looking at it, and I thought, well, if I just weld the eye on it, I don't know whether it's cast, it might break off. I'm going to drill a hole. So I start drilling, so I look at it, and there's a little divot in the side of it. And so I take a drill, and I'm drilling, and all of a sudden it just breaks through, and all this black stuff comes out. I went, "That's a cannonball." I'd like to have a friggin' heart attack. And I'm going, "Oh my God, you know, what am I gonna do?" Anyway, I'm racking my brain trying to figure out where this thing came from, and I finally remember it came from Larry. I called Larry, this is before he passed.
Yeah.
And I called Larry up. I guess I wouldn't have talked to him after, but anyway, I called Larry up and I said, "What is that?" "Why?" I said, "Drill a hole in it and all this black powder came out." And it said, "If I'd have struck a welding arc on that, it'd have found me scattered over about 4 acres. He said, "No, it's out of a coal ball mill. And they use that hole to determine when the ball's wearing out." So it run a double ball. Anyway, it filled up with charcoal. Anyway, that was the end of that.
Oh, wow, okay. That's pretty wild. Yeah, he passed on right before we moved up here, but we have a picture somewhere of Tiger Lily. She might have been 4 or 5 at Batson's hammering, and she was forging with Larry, because he'd point with a twig and say, "Hit right here," and she'd hammer right there. But
And usually sitting in a chair when he did it.
yeah, he's a character. I
Funny.
miss him.
Get back to that powder is where, with Gary, he's wicking that thing into the cable. And I walked over to him, and I was already doing this canister stuff before we got distracted with the Darryl Meyer story. And I said, "Why don't you put that in a piece of round pipe and put a cap on it and it'll weld?" And it did. And as far as I know, that was the first powder metal canister that was ever done. He and I did it together. And then we come to this signature. I knew about the powder. And so I had a friend of mine, Heidevick, cut that for me with a wire machine.
Yeah.
And it had all these little penetrations and stuff. And I said, "Okay." And it took a long time to cut it. You stretch that Schwarzer out, it's long. It took a long time to cut it. And it's got all those little penetrations that have to go in it, and they have to fit. And so I took it home, and I was trying to stuff this little 10,000 sheet in there. It wouldn't go. So he's 88 miles away. I had to drive back over there. I said, "Cut that in 2. I'm going to use it as a die." And so he did. I went home, and I couldn't get the stuff in there. And I crushed it in the press. Now, I'm going to paraphrase Joe. I drove back over there with this crushed thing that he had hours in. And I said, I had a mistake. And he went, "Golly gee, I wish that hadn't happened." But it took a while. Anyway, my ears were smoking.
Yeah.
And justifiably so. And anyway, he cut me another one. And we're sitting there looking at it. I'm sliding these little penetrations in there. And he goes, "Too bad we can't pour that in there." I said, "We can." The powder hit.
Powder, yeah.
And then I started doing it in canisters. And then you make mistakes, and it's where the paper came from.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, talk about that real quick.
Yeah,
'Cause I think that's fascinating.
One mistake. What we do is problem solving. You do it, I do it. You find solutions to problems, and they're not endemic to us. That same idea can nuclei across the globe.
Sure.
Anyway, so I ran out. I've been using burned stainless steel foil that I got a bushel basket from Bob Dozier years ago, and I'd cut those heat treat packets up, and I'd line my canisters because it'd make the sacrificial material come off.
Right.
And I teach that technique.
Right.
And I've passed it along for years and years and years, but it wasn't common knowledge. You see all this white out and all this
Yeah,
other
these
nonsense.
white outs is silly.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Anyway, because you get fresh material and it bites and it sticks. Anyway, I was doing that, and I put that in there, and then it would release. I ran out of it, and I had a little folder blade. I was doing a bunch of little parts, and I had it in a little tiny flat can. I was going to weld them all together, and I ran out of that. So I thought, well, what do they use in non-ferrous? Well, they use paper. In Mocha Megani, they use paper to segregate it. And so I put a little sheet of paper on both sides of this thing and welded it out with a TIG rig, and went pop, pop, pop on the hammer and welded it. And I started grinding the edges, and it didn't come off. And I thought, I kept looking for a weld line, segregation line, like you get with the same, didn't have it.
Yeah.
And I finally dipped the whole thing in acid, and you could see mosaic all the way around. The paper had turned to carbon, lowered the eutectic level of both sides. The carbon was absorbed and the material disappeared. It was a perfect welding flux.
Yeah.
And so I went, discovery.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I found out that I could do that in containments of powder, and a lot of times I'll set up a whole pattern out of paper. And I'll pour different kinds of powder in each cell. I'll forge weld that. The paper dissipates and is absorbed into the steel, raises the carbon content a little bit, and you got it.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a lot of interesting things that you discover while welding at, like for me, welding at altitude.
Right.
I think we were 7,500 feet up, and I was just like, man, this forge will not get above 1,800 degrees. Everything's stuck, no big deal. I thought that was kind of cool. But it's always fun, the adventure, like the problem solving, like, because for a while I had this thing when I first started out, like, I always talk about eliminating the rules.
Right.
And someone would say, you can't do that. I didn't know they meant they can't do it. And that's really what they were saying. They said, I can't do it, so it shouldn't be done. But then I started to run into people who would be like, whatever you want to do, you can do. There's no rules here. If it works, then it works. And don't be afraid to, like, I'm never afraid to risk ruining the whole thing. However many days it took, it doesn't matter to me. That was learning. I learned something. And I still will take a knife. I made a big chopper a couple weeks ago, and I wasn't necessarily testing. I was kind of having a little bit of a temper tantrum. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, I'm too old for that, right? So I start just it's a 14-inch blade. I'm just laying waste everything metal in the shop. If I see a big chunk of steel, except for my anvil, I won't cut those. That's not right. But like the leg vices in the stand, I was like, ching, ching, ching. I beat it until I broke the handle off of it, and the edge was just rippled up a little bit, and the biggest chip might have been 1/8 of an inch. And I'm like, I think the heat treat's pretty good on this, because I was cutting into 1-inch plates of mild steel. It was cutting in there a 1/2 inch. I had to hammer them all back over, otherwise somebody's going to get scratched up. I was like, well, I guess the heat treat's right. And it's hard, really hard. It's a 60 Rockwell Plus, and it's thin.
Yeah. And
it's like, it ain't going nowhere. So that was a discovery I made by having a berserker moment, I guess you could say, which isn't the best one.
I usually spend 2 or 3 weeks repairing when I have one of those. This thing here.
This is a transitional moment.
This was transitional.
I like to call those a pimp stick, but
epiphany. Pimp stick. This is epiphany pimp stick. Mac Daddy with this. This is flat now, but when I made it, it wasn't. And there's a story behind this. I learned with this following this hip technology, that things under compression weld.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to fix things. When you have a problem, you have to solve the problem. You have to fix it. And with some of these blades, you can easily have 100 hours in a folder blade before it ever gets to be a knife. And so I was in there and I was trying to weld. I'd gone out under my chop saw and I got all these stubs, and they had welding flux in them and pieces of mild steel handles, but it had all this pattern in it. I was going to put all that together. And I think Rick was down. Rick Furr was at the shop when I did it. I'm almost positive he was. And I'm trying to weld this stuff, knock it all together, and it ain't going. I said, I wonder if I can weld that in a die. So we took 2 big pieces of plate and a ball bearing, and we held the ball bearing. I welded a stick on the end of the ball bearing, and then we put it on a hammer, and we made the dies to make a ball.
Yeah.
Well, I put that in there, and so we found out when we were hammering the balls in there, you had to rotate them in order for the die to make like it's supposed to.
Sure.
So I already had that little bit in there. And so I got all the stuff together, and I'm trying to knock it together, and it ain't going. I thought, well, I'll put those ball dies in. And so I heated them up, and I put that in, and I hit it, and it looked like the planet Saturn. It had this big flash ring around it, and the ball was off centered like this. I went, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
You know? So I heated it back up to welding heat. I thought, what if I put that in a drill? So I'm spinning this thing as fast as that drill will run. I go back in the die. It makes a perfect ball
Yeah.
inside because it's spinning. There ain't
Yeah.
no place for it to flash.
That's cool.
And so I got a perfect ball out of there. I thought, well, hell, it's already in the drill. So I let it cool down a little bit. I walk over to the grinder and I'm grinding this thing and it's polished ball.
Yeah.
And so I keep going and I got it almost mirrored. And I'm looking at it and there's no cracks, there's no junk, there's no flux coming out, there's no oogies. And I dipped that in acid and I'm just literally whipped. I'm almost doing it now.
Yeah.
Because that pattern, as you see, is wrapped totally around it. It's got little anvils and all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff in it. Was wrapped totally around it and no flaws.
Yeah.
So what I did is I took that idea and adapted it to what I was doing because I learned that you could weld, if you weld in a compression, it can't not weld.
Right.
So I had a folder blade with multi-panels on it using that stacking method that I showed you, and it had a little crack in the cutting edge. And I thought, in that pattern that came down, I said, oh man, I can't have that, you know. It's like Schmidt said, there ain't no get-by factor. So I made me a die for that, and this thing's already surface ground. It's like 128 thousandths.
Yeah.
So the only thing wasn't in it was the pivot hole, and I found the crack. I went, and already heat treated, so I had to heat it back up to welding heat, flux it real good, and went in that die and went, and put that back together, and it cleaned up just under 125,000, about 124,000, perfect weld. So I use that a lot, but
That's
it's
cool.
that process of discovery. And when you get those little epiphanous moments, it just drives you crazy. You're like, who can I tell?
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of funny stuff like that, like you know, surface area. Like I like to make. I would see knives that were, you know, they were like quantum Damascus and some crazy purple, blue, green ivory. The knife shape itself not too complex, but the material is very complex, very interesting. But you know, I called it the other night it's kind of Liberace. You know what I mean? A little too. Man, what is that word? Like
Too
when
gaudy.
you go in the Palace of
Baroque.
Versailles,
Yeah,
you know, it's
Baroque.
like too much
Yeah.
for me. So I would take like a thing where when I started doing a fuller in kukri was because I screwed up. I thought I'd forged fuller in it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't grind it out. So I got a bigger and bigger wheel. And so I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be terrible. And it was like, da-da,
Yeah, there it is.
fuller.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I can do this. This is easy, you know? So I started doing it. But then I wanted to make things, I wanted a black piece of steel, and I wanted black micarta, and I wanted the knife to all be dark. But I wanted the shape to be so appealing that people would say, oh my gosh, that's so badass, because it was totally murdered out, you know? So those are fun things. And those came from screw up discoveries, you know, going through the process to discover like where I want to go and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to make it. And that's what's cool when you start playing with these things. For me, I've had 2 incidences where I was working on something very complex. I was doing a Quillian dagger and had a jade ball, and I wanted the ball to spin in it. I don't have a lathe. I don't know. I'm not a machinist. I don't even measure stuff. I have no idea. And it was like one of those things. I was like, man, I need to pray. I was praying about it. I was like, God, how do I do this? And I had no kid, I had a dream that night. It was like, here's the square. You drill this hole first, this hole second, this hole third. Chuck it up in your drill, and then grind it on the grinder.
Right.
And then once you know that all these pilot holes are set up, then you can go back and open these holes any size you want. So I opened a big hole to make the jade ball sit in there. So it cleared like 3/1000ths.
Right.
And I couldn't even measure 3,000. So how would I tell you that, right? But it did. It was just,
It's
it
a
was
little
enough
bitty.
to spin. Yeah, it was little. And it was perfect. But it was one of those things. It's like, I didn't know how to do it. And I feel like it's like God just like, here's how you do it. And then I was doing a gladius, and I'd screwed up. And I don't like the idea of, I never was a fan of threading a pommel on, because once I saw a hot fitted pommel on a sword, you know, it's like sword guard, sword pommel, all hot fitted, and the handle was put on. It's like, oh, you know, like on the old Viking swords.
Like painted the ends over.
So I was making a gladius, and I don't know how they did them, and I don't think really anybody does know. They'll say they know, but I didn't like the idea of threading it. So I figured out something kind of cool. I used softer materials, and I was really struggling, and we even have some video, and I was losing my mind because I did this one thing first, and my project was a gladius. So I saw again, prayed about it. I see an alligator going up in a culvert and biting. It was like biting a deer, and it couldn't get out.
Right.
So it was like that. I was like, oh, I got it.
Chinese
So
finger puzzle.
I had some of this steel. It was Batson had given it to me. It was like barrel steel and had 1% lead.
Right.
And I don't know how you mix non-ferrous, but anyway, it was 1% lead, so it was really buttery. And if you hit it, it starts to deform, just like gold was.
Oh yeah.
So I took the hard piece and the soft piece, and I made like a cage. So when I slipped them together, and I was like, it was like ding, 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 ding. You can't get it out, and they ain't never coming out. And I made a bronze sleeve, and anyway, that's how I did it. So those were ideas that, like, I didn't know how to do it, but it was like the answer came.
My mind is going slurp, slurp, slurp.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I can see that.
Yeah,
That's
I
one
like
of the
those
reasons I
things.
spent time with Virgil England because he could marry non-ferrous to fossils and all
Yeah.
kinds. He was good at it. He was an interesting guy.
Yeah, that's right.
But
Very interesting.
I'm always exploring new stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it's like this guy. That's laser.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool thing. You got holographic. It looks like W's inside of W's.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no forge welding.
No forge welding.
No forge
involved.
welding
The
occurred.
blade was forged,
Yeah.
but I overlaid the pattern with a laser. Everybody says, well, that's cheating. Cheating is having a tool that nobody else can afford.
Yeah.
That's what cheating is. It's so funny, these guys come to me, well, that's not traditional.
Who
I
cares?
said, wait a minute. There's about 6 or 7 guys, maybe a dozen guys now, or maybe a few more, that I can literally go out and get dirt and make my tools.
Yeah.
I'm capable of doing that, and I have done it. Larry Hurley and I, one time we took 23 pounds of iron sand, and Don was there, and we wound up making a 1.5-pound blade out of it.
Yeah.
I've got the blade from iron sand, so it's
Yeah.
capable of doing it. So usually the people that pshaw this or don't like it is because they either can't afford it or they're afraid to learn.
Well, it's a funny thing when I've heard people say, well, that's not traditional. And I'm like, excuse me, how old are you
Yeah.
to determine what would be traditional? Because, you know, I'm a history student. However, I don't tend to believe almost any of the history I read, because it will have an impractical story added to something that did make sense. And a historian who's never made it, never done, like, for example, when we were reading in a book, and we were reading, I remember in history classes, guys were like, well, when they came on with the iron weapons, it smashed those bronze weapons to pieces. And I'm like,
No, it didn't.
that never happened.
No.
That's nonsense. In fact, I feel like, you know, I don't think they ever actually made iron weapons, but seems to me is bronze would have been a superior material to make weapons out of when you have to outfit 10,000 people 10,000 archers who have 100 arrows each.
Mm-hmm.
If
You
know
got to
how make
hurry when your
bronze.
warfare drives everything.
Yeah, because I was thinking today, like, what do we make projectiles out of now? Copper?
Yeah.
You know,
That's it.
it's still
It has-
the same thing.
It's soft and it has mass.
Yeah. So you did this with a laser.
Yeah, that's something with a
and
laser.
you can feel it. It feels like an etch from Damascus, and it's well done. I mean, it's really cool, and I like that because it's a new tradition. It's a new thing that will be, you know, anything that's new. Sometimes there's a very teeny amount of people who accept it when it's new.
Right.
You know, like we did our Forge series. We had a very teeny amount of people that accept it. Now it's becoming more accepted. Now people are going, oh, that's great. I'm glad I got to see it. Even if they don't make anything, they like
but
to watch it.
It's ideal in this environment because it's sterile.
Yeah.
They can learn from you. They learn from a master that knows his craft. How about 2 knives in my life from other makers, and one of them is yours because of what was in it.
Yeah.
You put soul in your work, and that's a big deal to me.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Thank
Now,
you.
this thing is old school
Yeah, this is
because
cool.
that casting is pewter.
Pewter and
That was done a lot in 18. That's a piece of bamboo that was given to me by Koji Hara.
Kojihara.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
had
he's
that
cool.
thing for 20 years in my shop.
Yeah.
And a nice lady in France just bought that, so I'm going to ship
Yeah.
it when I get home.
This is always interesting handle material
It's a
to
root.
me.
See, it's
Yep.
solid.
Solid. You know.
It's got a little hollow right up the end. But that's right where the shoot comes out of the ground.
I had I was telling it was Stephen Garson. I was like, oh, I can cut any bamboo with one of my knives. He goes, okay, I'll send you a piece.
He
He
rattan.
sent me a piece like this, and it was solid And I was like, oh, you can't get through that. I mean, I don't know who can get through it, but I don't think it can be gotten through because it's solid. When it's green, maybe. When it's dry, not.
It's tough. That's what I've worked with Wally Hosstetter for years. He's one of the best restoration artists that ever lived on Japanese swords.
Yeah.
He knows as much about them as anybody.
Black handle.
Which is this one?
The black handle.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, that one. The micarta.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's it. Tony Bowes gave me that pattern probably 15, 20 years ago. And then I modified it to fit the way I make knives.
Yeah. I like your nail nick as an anvil. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a great knife.
Yeah, it's a mixture of the old and new. It's got titanium liner and laser cut the nail nick.
Yeah. I think taking some traditional patterns and making them very modernized is a way forward for us as bladesmith. And I know we bounce around and talk a lot, but I think about this all the time. I like making knives that are tricky because of their edge geometries, but they're functional. Like, I love to make kitchen knives because I know people enjoy that. They're going to use that. They're going to enjoy that. Kitchen knife is a knife that brings people together. I've made weapons. I've enjoyed making weapons. Made Bowie knives, all kind of stuff. I think a Bowie knife is really the most fantasy of fantasy knives. Now, I get in a lot of trouble for saying that probably, but it's interesting to make. And every now and then I'll still make what I consider one. But I like to make choppers. I like to make stuff that I use. I grew up in a swamp. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed hunting white-tailed deer and wandering in the woods, so I make stuff like that. And I like eating food and I like cutting stuff. So I like making kitchen knives. But I like this too because this is a classic.
And it's usable.
And it's usable. And you got modern materials in here. Micarta, titanium.
But the blade and the spring are old school. They're 1095.
Yeah.
That's the knife your grandpa carried.
Yeah.
And they always patina when you use them.
Yep.
And it shows good blade structure.
Yeah, that's cool stuff.
And this one is the same thing, but I put as a prototype. I put aluminum panels on it and I deep engraved that.
Yeah, it's got like that. I mean, that's literally canebrake rattlesnake right there.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That took a couple hours to cut that, but it's there. But that's the only way you can do that kind of cutting. These are all snake scales on the back as well, the little dark stripes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that micro engraving, you can't get tools that small, and in hard materials, you can't cut hard materials with those tiny little tools.
No, and that's deep.
Laser's the only way you can cut it.
Yeah. I like this, and you can't even see it's where you have the engraving, so you can't really see where the joint is, which is neat. That's the first time I saw Rafael Duran's folder. Mm-hmm. He was next to my friend Sam, and I was like, why would this guy make a knife that looks like a folder that don't fold? And I was just looking at it. I wasn't trying to fold it. I was like, I couldn't see it at all. And he's like, oh, no. And I was like, what? You know, and he opened it back up and it disappeared. I was like, that's a good fit up. You know, that's nice.
It takes time to get that. It's just like I made this after I came up and visited you the last time.
Yep.
I went home and I got all my roller skate bearings out and I made me a wheel and I made this thing, and it was learning. I'm just kind of some of my stuff I just kind of hang on to it. You know, if somebody wants to buy it, fine, but I like it. I mean, this thing was like. Okay.
I'll tell you a story about every folder I've ever made. I don't believe I sold any of them. I gave a lot of them to my friend Clint Watts.
Yeah.
So, because I didn't want them to fall into the wrong hands of a customer who go, this is crap.
Yeah.
You know, so like now I'll do a folder pattern. Like I'll make it out of cardboard or plastic, but now like with that folding kukri,
right?
I want to put it in production.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I do want to make them, but like, if I spend, for me making
you were looking for your knife.
Yeah, there you go.
I found it. I love this thing. And the thing is, I don't talk about it a lot, but I started doing martial arts in 1962.
Yeah.
I've been doing martial arts longer than most of these makers have been alive, and I'm not any good at it. My claim to fame is I've had my butt kicked by some of the toughest guys on the planet. Like my sensei Tiger says, is what he lacks in skill he makes up for with enthusiasm.
Chuck Norris broke his knuckle on your chin one time. That's a lot to say, probably.
Yeah. Well, then people that would whip him. Yeah, he'd walk in the room, the bears drop dead. But I like this design because it's in line with your arm.
Yeah, that was I designed that because my friend Doug said, "Hey, go." We had a fixed blade, and he goes, "Turn it into a folder." So he turned it into a folder.
Right.
And but I like knives that work and function and fold. That's a nice
Old
one.
school.
Ancient. I don't know how old
Yeah,
this. This is
Seax.
design goes back to pre-Roman era.
Yeah, penny knives.
Yeah. Folding sacks.
It's got a twisted mosaic blade in it.
This
And
knife is pretty saxy.
little carving. It's a Saxy knife.
Saxy knife. Got a little sheath for this, doesn't you? Yeah, this is a cool piece. I always like this one.
There's
That's
a
another
story
one.
behind that. I sold that knife to two guys were fighting over on a park bench in Tanny Hill, Alabama.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's a weird place to have a
was-
knife fight.
that was Calvert and Bud. That thing was designed when I was a young lad in the 50s. There was a guy named Dr. Beebe who did the first deep sea research, and they let him down in a big steel ball down to about 9,000 feet, and he was looking out through a quartz window about that thick, and about that big around, and taking pictures. And he took pictures of fish like that. And I was always fascinated with it. If I hadn't been, if I was at school now, it'd be Steve Schwarzer and the alphabet with what's wrong with this.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do math, I didn't write, so I didn't get to follow my dream of being a marine biologist, but I studied it.
Yeah.
Just like I've been doing amateur archaeology for 40 years, I study everything about stuff. If I'm interested in it, fine. If I'm not interested in it, you couldn't stick it to me with a nail. That ain't
Right.
happening. But he took pictures of fish like that, and so I made that. And that's a complicated weld because it's a twist pattern with a plug weld in it.
Yeah. It's a fish with the bonefish.
Yeah,
With the eye.
yeah, the little fish were clear.
Yeah.
So you had this little translucent body with, you could see all the bones in them.
Yeah, that's a cool piece.
It was
I
fun.
always liked that one a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the imaginative, whimsical,
Oh, I love that.
crazy stuff like that. I like the Hellmite.
You know why I do the whimsies?
Keeps you
And
sane.
because I tried doing real things.
Yeah.
And you always get this guy shows up with a pocket protector and 8 pins, and you've done an eagle. It's like, you go, what time did you do the study on this eagle? It's missing 3 flight feathers.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it's like Gary says, if it's a fantasy, it's always correct
Yeah.
because it's your idea.
Yeah.
So this thing only existed in my mind, and it's one of a kind. There'll never be another one because my head will never go back there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's just like this. Everything I do some stuff that's like these. I'm going to do a series of those that'll
Yeah.
be available. I do my little fighter there, and there's stuff that I enjoy doing because that incorporates the side of me most people don't get to see.
Yeah.
It's the martial side.
Yeah, I like this one. I forgot that it was double edged, and what's cool is this one's like straight, and that drops down to
Yeah.
meet it. So
It swipes off.
I think it's a practical knife, but it's always also if you got in a pinch, and you got attacked by a werewolf, this would be super.
Oh, you
handy.
could get them off, and they smoke when you stick them with that because of
Yeah.
the mystic symbols on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's cool. I like it.
But I like that ceramic design because I use a collar or a back grip. Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to flip them around. I got one I designed, but I made it so I could flip it out of the way and tie like a fishing line and put it back in my hand, or skin an animal and move it out of the way. And
What
put
is
it back.
wrong with you?
I don't know.
I wouldn't be worried about a fishing line. I'd be worried about my gun didn't go off and this thing is not going to misfire.
That was a little too PC of me, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd fall down on that thing in a boat. And it's like this giant stuff Gil Hibben was making, those big pieces. I looked at that and it fit over your arm and it got all these spikes on it. So
Yeah.
don't fall down the stairs.
Fall down the stairs. Yeah.
Nah, it was
Yeah.
hilarious.
Crazy
But
stuff.
it's fun stuff. I enjoy it. The brotherhood we've had for all these years. I've known you since you was a little youngster and I had hair.
Yep. I think I was 27.
Yeah,
I got a magic dog too.
yeah, we love that dog.
So one of the things we're going to work on is the next forged series. We did episode 1 is the elemental knife. Episode 2 is going to be Damascus with Steve Schwarzer.
Yeah, I'm gonna show my methods,
Yeah.
and, the way I do it, and it may not be the right way, but it works for me. and I'm gonna drop a bunch of stuff that will
Drop
really
some knowledge bombs.
Well, it's like I had one kid. He came, Joff Flato came and did a class with me, and went home and founded Flato Laminates. I just got back from Salt Lake City with another guy that's firing up a Damascus company. He really said, "Well, why are you teaching?" And I said, "Because it needs to be taught correctly."
I agree.
It's a big deal. And this is my legacy. This is what I'm passing on.
Yeah. Sometimes people will say things about teaching that I find incorrect, but I think where I am, I'm teaching to preserve and share an art. You're teaching to preserve and share an art. I don't really know as I discovered anything, but I have a way of forging blades to done that I don't really see other people do. And I like doing it this way, so I do it and I share it, and I enjoy meeting other people. If I value my time, if you value your time and my time, then people will show up in my shop. And I've had people come from, buck, nobody knows anything how to make a thing and make cool stuff, to somebody who's a master bladesmith, and we always have fun. We always make cool stuff.
That's what it's about. Yeah. And that one of the things I've discovered, and it took me a while, is when you really discover something, you tend to want to be covetous, but also you're busting at the seams to share it.
Yeah.
And so you got to be careful where you put the knowledge.
Be careful, yeah. I agree. On that note, and I don't want to interrupt you too bad, I learned that if I share it first, then there don't become a confusion about where a certain thing came up, like with, I feel like Daryl Meyer should get a lot more credit
than
he gets, because he,
he guided me,
yeah.
and we're all standing on the backs of giants. And my buddy Rick, I have to go back to Rick. I was writing an article on the history of mosaic, and I'm trying to deal with a 73-year-old memory that's not always good on timelines, but I do my best, and I'm being dead honest with what's in here. And I was writing about this technique that I use for doing the panels.
Yeah.
And I thought, basically, I had invented that at some point, and then somebody came along later and reinvented it, whatever. And I was talking to Rick about it because I was writing this article. And I wanted to get it right. I wanted it to be right. And he said, before you publish, I need you to look at something. And he sent me a pamphlet that was written about a Javanese bladesmith. This guy's from Indonesia. He's dead now. I don't know how old he was. And what we do is problem solving. That's not endemic to the U.S. or me or you or anybody. Yeah. If there's a solution to a problem and it involves Newtonian physics, then the solution is the same or near the same. And he sent me this pamphlet of this guy. It was published in 1992, and he was using my exact technique to get panels in those big Indonesian blades.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm looking at it and I went, okay. I don't know how old he was. I don't know when he started using that technique. It probably predated what I was doing. I don't know if he learned it from his dad or his grandfather, because that was passed down in a long tradition. Yeah. That technique could have been 200 or 300 years old. And then another instance, he sent me a picture of a pattern. And he said, how'd they do that? Well, I taught a young man out on the West Coast, Matt Deskin, Volcano Knives. Matt's wonderful. I love Matt. I taught him my powder metal technique, and I was using solids in the powder and stuff like that. And he said, well, I'll add something to that. And he came up with the plating powder. Yeah. He was doing all those little cutouts with the laser and stacking them and welding them and making beautiful images. Yeah. That was his deal. And so that whole thing, you're looking at how all this stuff ripples together, and it's like, okay, there's solutions to problems. And it doesn't matter where it came from. If you can adapt it and use it, use it. Put it to work. But give credit where credit's due. Yeah,
I think another reason we don't have anything to fear concerning sharing the ideas, because we're like 10 more ideas deep.
Yeah.
And I have ideas so deep, like I can't even get to those ideas. Like I'm thinking about now, it's like, what would you do if you won the lottery? I was like, well, I put them ideas into effect, man, and then make knives until the money runs out.
Exactly. Where was that thing with the face in it? It's in here somewhere. Face in the pattern.
Oh, your face?
Yeah, that old face pattern I did. I don't know. Maybe it's in the book. That was a face pattern.
Oh, we didn't pull it out of the book.
I don't know. Maybe didn't pull it out of the book.
Oh, there it is. No, it ain't.
No, it ain't.
Anyway.
No, it ain't. Anyway, I was looking
It
for
looks
it.
like it looks like that ancient.
Yeah,
Sutton
it was an
Hoo
old
page,
tribal
too.
mask.
Yeah.
It was a tribal mask.
Yeah.
And that was a solution to the problem. That was all made up in the shop.
Yeah.
But you get too covetous of ideas, and you need to turn that stuff loose. Just let it run.
Yeah, I
Doesn't
feel
matter
like-
what. Nobody can replicate Jason Knight. I could come to your shop and make your exact knife,
Right.
but I'd never be you.
Right.
You know, everybody is their own worst enemy in this.
Yeah,
business.
I have a mini me in the shop, and we don't usually get along in there.
No. Yeah, I've met her.
Anyway,
Extremely talented.
It's an honor to have you here and be able to talk and share ideas and share them with folks out there and catalog this. And I'm excited about us doing our next series and featuring you making Damascus. And what will we turn that Damascus into? Yet to be seen, and you'll see it
We'll
whenever we
make it
get the
happen.
Forge series. So if you're watching this, you're on Patreon, thank you for your support. You're going to see it first always. If you're not, then you want to be on the inside, go over to Patreon. Follow our fan page on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. But hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, get some chatter there, and I might even answer you back. So thanks for watching and have a great day.
See you out.
Bye.